Hey everyone, Bruce Eckfeldt here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so we can let you know when the next video is posted. You can also check us out at eckfeldt.com for more great content. With that, let's go check out the video.
You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And today we're here with guest Ryan McMunn, who is founder and CEO of Brick Language Learning. And we're going to learn a little bit about the background of that business. And Ryan's got a kind of a serial entrepreneur. He's been involved in several different businesses, some of them bigger, some of them smaller. We're going to learn a little bit about that and how Brick came about. Ryan, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. And, like I said earlier, congratulations. I've listened to several of the different podcasts and very interesting stuff, very interesting guests that you've had. I listened to Evan's this morning and Elaine's as well, and they were just fantastic. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Well, I appreciate it. It's really, it's about having the guests and about giving the guests a chance to kind of talk about their stories and what they've learned and share some of their experiences and some of their sort of sage wisdom on starting businesses, particularly in the service sector. And so why don't we just sort of start there? Give us a sense of kind of your professional background and sort of how you got into a position of kind of discovering the opportunity or seeing the opportunity for Brick, and then we can talk about what Brick's about.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully I actually have something that can be considered sage that comes out of my mouth. But so I got my start in 2004. For a manufacturing company called Tricam Industries. They do Gorilla ladders and Gorilla carts. A shameless self-plug are sold at Home Depot. The ladders, the carts are sold Home Depot, Lowe's, all those kind of places. But it was manufacturing. And so I moved to China in 2004 with them. Mm-hmm. I'll segue really quickly into what we currently do, and that's Brick Language Learning. Yeah. And we do online Mandarin, Chinese training, Brazilian Portuguese, and Spanish with teachers in China, Mexico, and Brazil.
Got it.
And what we have tried to do is blend technology and the traditional classroom so that you get that personalized touch of having a teacher that you can actually ask questions of, and kind of like the teacher has become a mentor. It's not just a Rosetta Stones type of product. Yeah. You're actually talking to a teacher, but we're using technology to make it more interesting, more interactive, and connect people and bridge the gaps between China, Mexico, Brazil, the United States. And the reason that I got into it was that I had gone to China in 2004 with Tricam Industries, and I knew no Mandarin when I went there, which was so difficult. And it's not only the language, it's also the cultural divide that you have. Yeah. And I tried everything. I tried all the big names that people have heard of. I tried local Chinese schools, and nothing worked. And part of the reason that they didn't work was the fact that they're all set in these systems, and you have to learn each chapter before you're able to move on to the next. And I failed miserably for 3 years. And I failed miserably not only in learning Mandarin, but I also failed career-wise because I couldn't figure out China. And I met this brilliant young woman named Casey Wong. And I had been introduced to her by a friend of mine. I walked into her classroom. She's a young lady from a small town in northern China of 8 million people.
In China, you can say that.
Yeah. She moved to the big city to try out what she could do. And I went in and she sat me down, and the first thing she asked was, what do you want to learn about? Yeah. And what do you need to learn about? And I said, I want to learn about hiking and skiing. I need to learn about business and manufacturing. And she said, done. That is what you're going to be learning about.
So you weren't in there trying to figure out how to order food or how to tell the weather or try to tell a stranger time.
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? So one of the programs that I went into, I got to a chapter called Red Autumn Leaves. And it was all about watching the leaves turn red in the autumn, which I can appreciate it. I'm an outdoors guy.
Okay.
You know, it's beautiful. But in business, when am I ever going to be talking about watching the leaves turn red in the autumn?
Yeah.
And I asked the teacher, can I please just skip this? I want to learn about talking to my managers and my colleagues and my business partners. And she wouldn't let me skip it. And I eventually walked out of class. And that's when I met Casey. And, you know, I mean, I don't like to sound like I'm bragging about myself, but it was 12 months after that initial meeting.
Yeah.
I'm walking into factories and doing multi-million-dollar deals on behalf of TriCam.
Yeah.
And my career just exploded in the best of ways because I learned the language, which allowed me to understand the culture and the people that I was dealing with. And that was kind of what spawned the idea of BRIC language learning. And I wanted to open up the doors to not only China, but just international business in general, to as many people as I possibly could. And I can't take credit for the idea. Actually, I give that credit to Casey.
Mm-hmm.
She actually came to me when she found out that I was moving back to the United States. And this is 2012. I moved there in 2004 and asked, would I ever want to do business together?
Yeah.
And I said, that depends on what
business,
and what you're talking about.
Autumn leaves, that she wanted to sell autumn leaves in the United States.
So she laid out this idea for doing online Mandarin training using her teachers, her method online for students in the United States. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. I jumped at the opportunity. I said, I'd like to be more than just Mandarin Chinese. I want to look at, you know, what other languages are really critical for U.S. businesses, U.S. international entrepreneurs, and young professionals that want to get into that world. And Spanish is an obvious one, obviously. And then the other one that I saw as kind of a niche market was Brazilian Portuguese. And so we started with those three. I went to Mexico and Brazil, started making the connections in those countries and figuring out how to start everything up. And we got the business. It was actually founded in 2011. We started marketing in 2012. In addition to the language component, we do study abroad programs with universities in China. One that we're very proud of is Shanghai University of Finance and Economics. And then we also do teaching English as a second language. And we're just about to announce a very random au pair program for U.S. people and really anyone worldwide that want to go to China and work as an au pair. So we've got, in addition to the language, a bunch of different ways for people to actually get involved in that international business community. And it's something that I'm really proud of because I blindly walked in to an opportunity in 2004, and it changed my life personally, professionally, and every other way that you can imagine.
Yeah. I studied Spanish for a long time, then ended up at McGill University in Montreal. It was kind of one of those, I'm not sure how to make this translation, but it was, but I get that feeling, you know, and I'm sure in China, you know, times 1,000 is finding that it's a connection thing. It's not just a communication thing. It's a feeling of belonging. And when you don't speak the language, you feel isolated and you don't understand what's going on. It's hard to just, beyond just being able to kind of go to the grocery store and function or at a restaurant, it's feeling like you're part of something. And once you start to learn the language, it just blossoms. Like you start to feel connected to people, to culture, to activities, to events. So I can imagine how that process was for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just the thing, is you have to know the language and the culture, and it opens up so many doors as you go. And, you know, you had asked me earlier today, you know, kind of what was something surprising that happened as you tried to grow the business. And I grew up in doing business in China. I grew up doing business in a foreign culture. And as I started BRIC out, I knew more about Chinese culture than I did about U.S. culture.
Yeah.
And like, I came in hot to the United States. I was like, I thought I was king of the world. You know, I came in and I had way.
Well, so actually, let's go back because I think it's important to understand. So when you like on the business, when you were working with the Truckham and doing the ladders and the equipment that you can find in Home Depot and Lowe's and things like that, give us a sense of kind of the business process you went through there. Where were you in terms of size of business? Where did you take it? Because I think that's an important aspect of understanding your kind of journey and the experiences that you've had.
Yeah. So when I started out at Tricam, I started out as a quality control inspector. I got into social and environmental auditing, going into factories and making sure that they were paying employees right. And that's actually, I'm glad that you asked this, because it's actually one of the reasons why I said to myself, I'm not leaving China until I speak Mandarin. As an auditor, I had to walk into factories and determine if they were paying the right wages, do a safety audit, make sure that everything at the factory was happening. They had safety equipment on all the machines, all this kind of stuff. And there were never any real like blacklist type violations. You didn't walk into a Chinese factory and see child labor or something like that. Yeah. But what you did have was factories not paying their employees according to Chinese labor law. Yeah. And there was almost like an unspoken agreement between the workers and the factory owners that the factory workers weren't demanding higher wages because they were already getting paid 10, 12, 15, 20 times what they would be getting paid back in their home province. Yeah. So Chinese labor law was up here. They're getting paid down here. The owners and the workers had this. And I had to go in, and as a U.S. manufacturer, you cannot have anything like that happening. Mm-hmm. And if you just look at the set of books that is right in front of you, that they've just given you, you look at it and everything adds up perfectly right. They're paying all of their employees according to the Chinese labor laws and all that. Mm-hmm. You start cross-checking those books with leave reports, with quality control reports, with all the other different reports that they're doing at the factories. And all of a sudden you notice something doesn't add up here. Yeah. You know, this guy checked in for work on Tuesday, but he was supposed to be on leave. Yeah. And so you do all this cross-checking, you find out, and almost every single factory had 2 sets of books. Yeah. And it was eye-opening in a lot of ways because, I mean, I had never seen just blatant fraud like this. But it was also, what do you do to solve this, you know? And if we would have said, all right, that's a blacklist item, we wouldn't have been able to do business with any of the factories that we were looking at doing business with. And so what we did instead was said, all right, we're going to work with you guys. As long as there's not like a true blacklist item, we're going to work with you guys over the course of the next year. Get your accounting straight. But what we need is truth and honesty. Show us the sets of books. Show us both. You've got real and you've got fake. Yeah. And because of the clout that we had, they would show us both sets of books. Yeah. And we were able to work with most of the factories. I'd love to say all of the factories, but there was one, just to give you an example, where I didn't speak any Mandarin at this point. I sit down. I've got one of my colleagues from our Shanghai office with me. Yeah. And we're going through the books. We took a tour of the factory. The factory setup is where you've got like a group ownership and then there's 25 factories underneath. Yeah, okay. And we're looking at the books and they've agreed to show us both sets of books, real and fake, right? So we're looking at both sets of books. All of a sudden, the big boss at the factory owner, manager, jumps up and starts screaming at this guy, chases him right out of the room in front of you. It was like a cartoon almost. It was like, just blows up and runs out and chases this guy out of the room. And I looked at my colleague and I was like, what just happened?
WTF.
And yeah, seriously. And he was like, Ryan, just shut up. I'll tell you when we get to the hotel tonight. Yeah. So we get back to the hotel and he looks at me and he's like, Ryan, I don't think we can possibly do business with these guys. What happened was that they not only have 2 sets of books, they've got 3. They've got one to trick an auditor like myself. Yeah. They've got a second one that's real. And what this guy said that made him get chased out of the room was, oops, I'm not showing him the real set of books and the fake set of books. I'm showing him the other fake set of books that we used to cheat the ownership. And I was like, whoa, are you kidding me? They have 3 sets of books? And I was like, wow. years trying to work with these guys and get their accounting right and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it would never happen because there's too many sets of books here.
Yeah.
And so I looked at him that day and I was like, this is why I need to learn Mandarin is I have to, first off, we're wasting your time and my time by having both of us here. If I spoke Mandarin, I could be just sitting here by myself and doing this stuff. And you could be at a different factory doing the same thing. Yeah. And so that's where I decided I am not leaving here until I speak Mandarin. And I got to say, back then, this is 2004, 5, that was the norm. And I can say this unequivocally. If you have a Chinese factory that's doing business with U.S. retailers, 99% of them are doing things absolutely right because it's too much business to risk on trying to save $1 here, $1 there. It's a different world now, but man, I mean, that's why I wound up learning Mandarin in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great story. Cause I think it just proves the sort of the point of why, just more than just kind of knowing the language, but being capable in the language from a business point of view. So you can really sort of see what's going on and really get to the subtle aspects of the communications, not just the meaning of the words, but good.
Yeah.
So you embarked on this learning Mandarin mission. You got into this, you met this wonderful person who had a program that could actually help you learn rather than helping you understand autumn leaves. So how did you first start that Brick as a company? What was the first kind of set of moves that you made to actually put this into play, put this into market?
So we were fortunate. First set of moves was the conversation that I had with Casey, and trying to figure that whole portion of it out was interesting and more difficult than you'd expect. I mean, doing business in China and setting up a business is not easy. We were fortunate in the fact that Casey already had a business set up.
Got it.
So I didn't have to go through that whole legal process of getting a wholly owned foreign enterprise set up or anything like that. We just did a business through the U.S. company that we had set up and her company. Now we've got the Woofy set up and all that stuff. But that was the first move.
So what did you call it? Woofy? Wholly owned foreign
enterprise.
Wholly owned foreign enterprise. Okay, good.
So now we've got the Woofy set up. But the other moves were figuring out Mexico and Brazil. And that was hard. Their cultures, and also figuring out the U.S. and their cultures that I went to Mexico in high school, and I had never been to Brazil. So I didn't know anything about doing business in those locations. Yeah. And one thing that I always tell people about China or doing business anywhere internationally is you got to find people you can trust. Yeah. And I was fortunate right off the bat to find people in Mexico City that I could trust. Good. And we're good people, but it's always a risk, because the people that you can't trust are trying to make you trust them.
It's like salespeople. It's like the salespeople, they can always sell you on the roll, but can they really sell?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I was fortunate in Mexico to find somebody right off the bat that was a really, really good person. And they've been a great business partner. And I had my biggest problems actually in Brazil and here in the U.S. And that's what I was starting to get at earlier. Yeah. Like, I grew up doing business in China. I came back to the United States to set this business up. We started trying to go to market, and I didn't know anything about digital marketing. I knew nothing about Google, like SEO, Facebook, Twitter. LinkedIn was always over in China, but all these other things have been banned. Yeah. And their versions of them, like Baidu over in China, is like their version of Google. Okay. It's all pay to play. Whoever has the most money winds up at the top of the list. Yeah. Or the best government connections. So I came in thinking, I'm an American. I know American culture. I know how to go to market. And I quickly realized I knew nothing about going to market in the United States in this day and age. And watching the dollars flow out and nothing coming in was absolutely shocking. I was like, how do I not know my own culture? And I'm running a company that all we do is preach learning about other cultures. And same
the irony.
Yeah, seriously. And same thing in Brazil, and we weren't trying to sell down there, but trying to get set up. Yeah. the sexy name is Rio de Janeiro, like that. You sit there and you talk about doing business in New York, Shanghai, Rio de Janeiro, Mexico City. Yeah, that sounds great. The reality of Rio, and I'm painting a little bit with a broad brush, but it's like a beach culture. It's a resort town. They're very laid back. And so we had a CEO of one of the oil and gas companies that we're working with, signs up for lessons. His first 3 lessons, his teacher decided, well, it's 80 and sunny, I'm going to the beach. He didn't show up for the class. So I hired someone here in New York, a brilliant Brazilian young woman, Lydia Albuquerque, who steered me in the right direction. It was like, look, we need Sao Paulo. That's business. That's like a New York type of area. Let's start hiring teachers there and make partnerships down there. And it was the best thing that we ever did for Brazilian Portuguese, because it is the same like fast-paced, we show up for meetings on time type of culture. I mean, it's like going from New York to a beach town in the US. It's just in Brazil. But I learned a couple lessons about American culture and Brazilian culture right off the bat that were very eye-opening.
So in terms of the business now, so how are you structuring it? How does the actual model work? So you've got teachers in these locations. How are you generating leads? How are you generating customers? And how are you finding teachers? And what's that matchmaking kind of logistical process look like?
Yeah, so all of our lessons are online. Teachers up on your screen live. All of our content goes on screen next to the teacher. The teacher's in control of all of that content. The teachers are in China, Mexico, and Brazil. And for lead generation, the thing that I just talked about in getting set up and figuring out marketing and all that, we made a hard pivot. And I hate that word because everybody talks about how they have to pivot and stuff, but all these little catchphrases in the entrepreneurial world. But we made a hard pivot and we said, all right, we're not getting any traction online. And this is back in 2012. Now our online marketing is taking off, but instead of trying to market it to the general public and just go out and do Google AdWords and watch money fly out and Facebook and Twitter, we turned to kind of a traditional source, and that is networking and going out and calling up contacts that we previously had. So I was a member of the American Chamber of Commerce for a long time when I was living in China. I started reaching out to companies that I had met through the American Chamber of Commerce. I got a new membership there. All of a sudden you go straight to those people in Shanghai and say, hey, we've got this online language course. You guys are operating all over China. Your executives are flying back and forth from Beijing and Shanghai to New York and LA. Give us a shot and do a free trial. And that was how we got a foothold. And we pivoted from trying to just mass market to let's look at corporate clients that have a direct need and understanding of that need. And that really made the difference in the first couple of years for us, was making that pivot to corporate clients. And they're great because for us, and this is different, I'm sure, than a lot of the people that you're talking to, but they're sending expat people over to China or down to Brazil or Mexico. And they go for 2 years. And they want to learn some of the language so that they can talk to their colleagues and their business partners. And then they move on to a different role. And then a new person comes in and we've already established a relationship with that company. So bam, they plug that person right into our system. And another, great networking lead story that I have is, it was LinkedIn. This is this is how I met you. It's like you sent me a message on LinkedIn. And one thing that I've always done in business and personally is I say, let's have the conversation and just do it. And so we had a conversation, and now we're on this podcast together. We had a great night at the Norwood Club. So this guy contacts me from Eastern Europe. And on LinkedIn, and he says, I've got a client that he worked for a relocation company. I've got a client that could really use some language courses. Is there any chance? And I was like, who is this guy from Eastern Europe? And I thought to myself, you know what, just have that conversation. And a lot of times having a conversation turns out to be a waste of time, but sometimes it winds up to be the best thing that you could have possibly done.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was. I had the conversation with him, and it seemed like a real lead. And unfortunately, my uncle passed away in the middle of this, totally unexpectedly. So I was at his funeral. I passed the conversation on to Casey over in Shanghai. And next thing you know, we've got a corporate client called Corning, who's building a factory in Hefei province, or in Hefei. And they've got 150 engineers and their spouses going over.
Wow.
And they want to offer as an employee benefit language classes. And bam, next thing you know, this is our biggest corporate client. And it's all from some random person from Eastern Europe contacting me. And next thing you know, giddy up, let's go.
Yeah. Although I think, yes, it seems fortuitous and random, but I think the one thing that does really make sense in that is the fact that you sort of taken this whole kind of learn a language market, and you've identified a very particular type of person in a very particular type of situation that needs to learn the language in a particular way for a particular purpose, and you've created a solution really geared towards that. So, I mean, the fact that this person reached out, certainly they saw that out of all the different language options, language programs that they could investigate, yours really bubbled to the surface that way because of the way you approached it and the solution that you were providing. And I think that, it's kind of one of the rules that we have in scaling businesses in general, but certainly services. The faster you want to grow, the more you want to scale, the more focused you need to be. You need to really zero in on the product, the service, the offering you to the channel, like how are you going to sell it is key. Is key.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. And I think a lot of it too is the personalized touch. It's that question that Casey asked me, what do you want to learn about? And what do you need to learn about? And that's what we're providing to these companies. So when we're working with a manufacturing company or a tech company or a financial firm, we're able to kind of gear it towards them within the framework of our system. And that really pays off in the long run. And then next thing is you've got your Bank of China is recommending another financial firm, or that guy leaves Bank of China and goes to ICBC. And all of a sudden, there you go. And so it's weird because we're in the tech industry, but a lot of our marketing and a lot of our sales is that traditional way of
relationship. Relationship selling. So we're going to hit time here in a little bit, but this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot. I think we've covered some really good stuff. If people want to find out more about you, about Brick, what's the best way to get more information?
They can email us. I'd love to give my personal email, but I travel so much that I probably won't respond. So info@bricklanguage.com. It's BRIC language.com is probably the best way. We've also got contact us on the website, so they can go there as well.
Awesome. And I'll make sure those are in the show notes. And I'm assuming you anticipated this, but can you say a little parting, thank you for listening to Scaling Up Services in Mandarin?
Yeah. 谢谢你们. Yeah. This has been great.
Great. Thank you so much. Ryan, I will talk to you again soon, but thank you for being on the program, and I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.